So hello everyone, welcome to Recess, brought to you by Roadmunk. We're really glad you could take a break with us today. We've postponed all of our in-person product-to-product events that were hosted in Toronto, New York, and Chicago due to COVID-19. So for the time being, Recess is where you can learn about all things products with a lot of awesome PMs that we've curated for you. My name is Amy and I'm a content marketing specialist at Roadmunk, and I'll be hosting our Recess session today. If you do follow our community, we also have a podcast called Product to Product that I host and produce that you could subscribe to on your preferred podcasting platform. We'll record this live session, but we will also be posting the recording plus a summary with time codes on our Medium page in the coming days. And we'll just wait a few more minutes for some people to filter in. And feel free to let us know where you're from, what company you're at, and what role you're in. And let us know if you're a repeat attendee, because we love seeing that. Today we have Liz, Roadmonk's event manager, moderating. She'll be taking your questions, so feel free to send them in throughout this conversation, and we'll answer them in the last 10 minutes of this 30-minute session. Okay, let's get started. So today we have Matt from Drift with us. Welcome to Recess, Matt.
Hello, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Matt is a product lead for growth and life cycle at Drift, which you may have heard of for their awesome marketing materials and amongst other things. So Matt, like a lot of PMs, you use the phrase, you landed headfirst into product. And you've had a bunch of experiences at product companies, but can you share a little bit about your career trajectory?
There we go. Okay, great. Yeah, so totally fell into it head first. My friend had just started a startup and I was looking for a gig. And I reached out to him and said, hey, can I work with you? Just because I thought he was really interesting to work with and learn from. And he said, yeah, we actually have this spot for someone to be a product manager on this new thing that we're building out. And I said, I don't know what that is, but if you think I could be good at it, sure. And so I did that. That product and company crashed and burned about 9 months later. It was quite an experience. And then after that, I just kind of kept following people that I felt like I can learn from a ton. And that led me through a couple other product roles, one at HubSpot where I worked there for a while. And then more recently, I joined Drift, where I've been for the almost past 5 years now, which is way longer than I thought I would be here. But I joined as the first product manager on the team before we had any customers or revenue. And I've seen the company grow since then. And my product role has evolved quite a bit over the time there. And I've done product with a growth lens. I've done product with a product launch lens. I've done product with all sorts of stuff here at Drift. So that's some quick background on me.
So you've been at Drift for, you said, almost close to 5 years, and you've picked up many hats to wear, and you still wear many hats. Can you tell us a high-level overview of what Drift does and how your role fits into the organization?
Sure. So Drift is a conversational marketing platform, and my role today is I'm product lead in our product organization, where I oversee one of our core enterprise offerings, one that we actually just launched a couple months ago. And then additionally, I'm player coach. And so I PM a team that builds all of the onboarding tools within Drift. And then over the years, I've PM'd all the teams that built and launched the chatbots, the mobile app, the CRM, the conversations view, all the things that go into making the conversational marketing platform work. I've had a piece in at some point. And so today, as I said, I'm product leading the enterprise piece, PMing the onboarding pieces, and then additionally, I am the owner of our self-service business. So any company that's under a certain amount of employees that shows up and purchases Drift self-service, I kind of own that business unit. So I have churn numbers that I'm reporting on, revenue numbers, and all that fun stuff. And and there's a couple other random hats that I wear at Drift, but those are just because I've collected them over time and aren't necessarily product related.
Yeah. So in our pre-interview, you talked about the importance of getting something shipped and then being able to iterate on it, and that being a very valuable thing. But then we also discussed that this may not be the way that enterprise works, since they tend to have they tend to be legacy companies and with more red tape. So can you talk about the flexibility then that a PM needs to tune into?
Sure. So the quick context on that is when I first joined Drift, we started as a free offering really and have moved up market. So the very first Drift offering of a paid account was like $10 a month, and then we rolled out a $50 a month plan, and then $500 a month plan, and now we have people paying us thousands of dollars a month for our platform. And so the types of process that we use to ship product when it was the free, like low dollar value offering to like small, medium businesses and all that looks very different than what the enterprise offering is, which I'm learning today. And with like low stakes, low dollar value, it's really easy. And I would highly encourage to have a mindset where you just like get the thing out, just keep getting stuff out, learn as you go, ship the thing, and like iterate on it over time. And the reality that I'm continuing to learn with enterprise is that the threshold for frustration is much lower. And additionally, the amount of time that it takes to get an enterprise customer up to speed with
Right.
something new that you built takes a lot more, right? Because
Mhm.
generally it's not just, three people operating on your tool. They've trained a whole team of 30 people using a part of the product, and then something changes for all of them, right? All those people have to get retrained. So we try to use the same systems for shipping stuff in that
Mhm.
segment of the market. And all the admins, not all the admins, but some of the admins would get really frustrated because they were like, my team's mad at me now, right? Like we caused, by trying to solve their pain and shipping faster, we actually caused them more pain because of the like internal change management that had to go on.
Right.
And so just the way that I've learned to think about that stuff is quite different.
So what would you say are some of the core principles for building a product org for you?
So
I know that's
at
a loaded
base,
question, but I feel
yeah,
like,
yeah, very, very loaded. At
yeah.
base, it has to be customer driven. Like I think it's really easy to get caught up in making decisions as a product organization or as product people or as product teams uh, that are driven by the viewpoints of all the super talented folks on your team, right? So discussions turn into debate between the designer wants it to look this way and have this UX, the engineer says that this part's really complicated, and the product manager wants it to operate like this other tool in the marketplace, right? And you wind up with those three competing opinions. But at the base, where I think those teams fail is they like make the decision based on those things rather than like ignoring all of that and then making the decision based on the customer. So I think
Right.
the like fallback and really the forefront of the decision needs to come from a customer perspective. I think I've also just spent 2 years running and operating growth teams within Drift, and the way that growth teams operate are very like scientific method oriented, right?
Mhm.
So what is the observations? What's the hypothesis? What's the the process for experimentation, and what are the goals and outcomes, and like did it work? That's not exactly what the scientific method is, but it's similar. And the way that those teams operate are like super process driven. And I think uh, there's this debate in the growth community of like, are growth teams the future of like product organizations? I
Mhm.
actually don't think that it's that. I think that it's more that the growth process is the future of the way that product organizations operate, right?
Mhm.
Being experiment driven, hypothesis driven, goal and metric oriented. And so that's another principle that I think of. And then one of the things that we've started to do more and more of is uh, set actual revenue goals for
Mhm.
product teams. So, uh, for example, I mentioned that I product lead one of the enterprise offerings that we have. One of the goals that I have set for that group over this quarter is to drive a certain amount of pipeline revenue for our sales team as a result of that product, like directly attributed to them selling our product. And so I think that that's something that I'm seeing a ton more benefit of more than negative. Like I think it's really
Right.
easy to see that it's negative because it's like, well, driving pipeline, but you're a product organization, you can't control that. And so there's a lot of tension with that, but I found that the benefits outweigh the negatives in that case.
Mhm. And so one of the cores is being very user centric and very empathetic towards the user. But then you also talked about like having a business metric tied to growth. And is that what I'm getting? So then how
Yep.
does that product team help drive like how is that balance? We always ask that. How do you balance that out with like, your customers wanting certain things, which is going to get you a lot of money versus, your product team saying, I don't think that's a timeline we can, actually do. How
Yeah.
do you balance that?
So here's my take on this. Let's use the example of driving pipeline. Um, it is beneficial for me as a product person to anchor myself in, can I equip the sales team to sell more? Or a similar goal can be like retention numbers or upsell or expansion numbers on the customer success side of things. Can I, as the product person, build something that solves for driving more revenue or keeping more customers or driving new sales pipeline? Because the only way that I can successfully do that is by solving real customer pains, right? Because if I'm rooting in solving the true pain,
Right.
then it becomes super easy for the sales team to sell the thing, right? Then they're singing our praises all day long because they're like, of course I could sell this thing like this because I pointed out, and the customer is like, I have that problem too. And then they purchase because it's very apparent, right?
Yeah.
The tying of that is super clear. And same thing with having the metric tied to retention. I also think that it's really important because it forces myself as the product lead and then the PMs themselves to not forget about all that goes into equipping the rest of the organization to make the thing work. Because if your metric is purely just I don't know, number of people that take an action within an app, like a
Hmm.
part of the app that you built, it becomes really easy to just like live in the product world and like find places in the app to like slap on little promo things like tooltips or like links to your new page that you built or whatever it is. Like it, and then your whole product organization becomes this like, drive this action within the product. But the best way to succeed as a company in serving your customer is to make sure that your support team knows exactly how that thing works. So I mean, as the product manager, I have to take it upon myself to make sure that they are trained, right? I have to make sure that the sales team actually understands the pain and the value that we're bringing to them. So yeah, I think that it drives more alignment, even when it seems like, well, how is the product organization going to get more purchases? If it's not through people putting in their own credit card, right? You do that by making sure that you're actually aligned with the rest of the organization and not operating in a silo.
Right. And actually solving the customer's problem and giving them value so that they'll actually want to
Yep.
give you the money. Um,
Right. Right. Because,
and
and yeah, otherwise, just more point to add. Otherwise, if you aren't like truly aligned with, if you have a sales org, your sales org, or your customer success manager, your customer support managers, then and what I've seen happen in like in pockets is you wind up with those teams feeling like you're not actually solving the the pains that they're dealing with all the time, right? And so then you wind up in this echo chamber where like everyone feels like the product organization isn't doing enough because you're not listening to them and using them as another input for your solution.
mhm. Has that ever been your experience during your career, and how did you solve it then?
Yeah, I think we've, as Drift has grown. So as I mentioned, I joined when we were less than 10 people,
Hmm.
and today we're almost 400. And I've watched us go through rapid learning, rapid growth, where we start to get to that point where there's friction in the other parts of the organization and I feel like they're not listening. So one of the things that we recently rolled out was a customer pain dashboard. So there's now this internal place where all of our different team members or departments can go in and submit things on behalf of customers to say, I keep running into this problem, and then other people can upvote it, and there's discussion that can happen, and then the product organization can flag it when the things get done. And so we found that has been a really good way to catch that friction and frustration before it actually builds upon itself.
Mm-hmm. In our pre-interview, a piece of advice you've historically given to junior PMs or APMs is that something which was passed on to you, you said, by your former boss. And it's that all PMs hit this wall around month 2 to 4, where everything makes them feel like they're not meant for this job. And so what are some things to do to help PMs get through this period? Like when they're in the pits of despair, questioning their abilities and going through imposter syndrome, maybe they're new at their company, so they don't want to, even Slack someone and be like, hey, I really need help. What should they be doing to ask for this help?
Yeah, I think everyone goes through it in either, the first role that you're taking as a PM or in a new organization. I watch a ton of like seasoned PMs show up at Drift, and there's always like this like pit of despair that folks go through. And my best advice is like, one, you will not make it through and be successful unless you continue to ask questions and like do whatever you can to learn about the customer and the problems that you're solving. And I think the second piece is that often that happens because that like this feeling of like I'm failing at this role shows up because you start hitting walls, and maybe, oh, this is the engineering team's telling you that this is like way more technical than we can deal with right now. Or the support team is saying that they're like, how can you be working on this thing? There's these 12 other problems right now, right? Like you start to get this cacophony of like feedback from everywhere. And so I think so this is actually my second thing. 2, you have to like remove your own ego of like having the right answers from the equation. And 3, having your own like very clear prioritization system against it is critical. Like if you're in that mode and you're just trying to like be reactive to stuff, like it's not going to work unless you have a really good system for yourself for organizing all of that, whether that's your own, system, whatever it might be, a tool, a spreadsheet, a notepad, whatever. You have to have some baseline there, or else you are going to get super overwhelmed and then start to like break down in that place. And it's a tough place to be, but it is it's important to like know your system, know that you don't need the answer, you just need to find the right answer. I forget what my first thing was, but
What do you say to PMs that think they can solve everything within their product org? Like, have they lost the idea of what a PM should be doing in that role?
Yeah, so the way that we think about product management at Drift is that it's actually not on the PM to craft the solution. It's on the PM to give the clearest framing and understanding of the problem and arm the designers and the engineers to create the best solution. So I have found that system works really well because I am not the talented designer, and I'm not the person that can build the code. And so when you hand over the ownership of creating those solutions to those around you, and you pull in the rest of your organization, like your customer success managers, your salespeople, all that into the solution crafting, you actually wind up with better solutions. I'm going through this cycle right now where we're building a new part of the product, and I had a pretty clear approach of what the solution was. And in this case, I tried to be a little heavy-handed in defining what the solution was, and I got a bunch of pushback from the team. And where we landed after all that pushback, which I was frustrated about at first, where we ultimately landed was actually a better solution that everyone had more confidence in, and they were more excited about because they came up with it themselves. So I think that it's I know some organizations are different and the product manager is expected to come up with the solution. I have just found in our cases that the more that you can bring in the people that are building it and get them close to the customer and close to the customer problem,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a very clear definition of what the problem is and what the market looks like and what other people are doing, like what patterns out there exist to solve that problem, then you can make a better solution through your team.
Right. It seems like that takes a lot of trust. And I feel like when you're working cross functionally, that may be lost or that may have not been built. I'm not sure if you have any advice on how to build that trust within even your team and then cross functionally as you're working on something.
Yeah, I think the trust gets built with um, like very clear proactive communication from you as the product manager, and then transparency into the decision making process. So I think we as product people often have a, a bit of a tendency to um, think that it's actually better. Think that the best path forward is to just like point out where we're going and like help everyone see this new thing that's being built and why why it matters and why it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the more transparent that you can be about this, all the blank space as to why you're not doing this other stuff, I think you actually wind up in a better space with the rest of your team and your customers. Like the amount of times that our PMs have gotten on calls with customers where or prospects where they basically said like, I'm not going to keep using your product, or I'm not going to buy your product unless you have this thing.
Mm.
And the amount of times that we got on those calls, heard them out, and then helped them like talk them through like why that isn't a thing that we're doing right now,
Mm-hmm.
and like why against this other priority it actually can get you more value.
Right.
We actually wind up in better places, and even in some cases one of the product managers went through this call where he thought the person, it was one of our bigger accounts, and thought the person was going to churn, and actually came out the other end. They got on the phone, said we're not doing this thing, and explained all the like reasons why and about the other stuff that we're doing instead, and they actually got off the call with a meeting booked to talk about expanding onto another part of the product.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing with your internal organization too. Like it's important to highlight what's not being said as much as it is like the thing that you're bringing to the table, because that's how you gain the trust. Because then they can understand like, oh, if I were in your shoes, I would also make that same decision, right? Rather than this black box of like, we just make the best decisions. I
Yeah.
think that that's a really important way to build trust.
I think the customer even just wants to hear kind of a why some
Mm-hmm.
features not being done versus being told like, no, we're not making this whatsoever. But if they sort of understand the process of why it's not being done and there's a reasoning behind it,
Yep.
you'll avoid the dreaded C word, the churn.
Yep.
So here's a question we have. You've seen Drift grow while being involved with the product side. What was the biggest challenge you faced while scaling up, and how did you ensure your customers didn't lose interest in this period?
Yeah. So I think so I'd say there are two phases of challenge here. One was when we were still early, like really trying to find product market fit, and we really aggressively pivoted the product and the solution and the persona that we were selling to every 2 months for the first year and a half. And it was incredibly stressful. And we would sell people on one thing. And then 2 months later, we decided that like, that's not the way we wanted to build the product anymore. So we weren't adding more feature sets. And I remember having discussions with our co-founders and our CEO, David Cancel, about this. And he was like, look, we're not at a stage where we're focused on churn. Like it's going to happen. We're no longer in that path, and if we can bring these customers along with us, then great. But I think we can't lose sleep over that, because we're following like where the market and where the opportunity is. So I think it was in that early stage of like product market fit and like finding your first core base.
Oh no, is it just my Wi-Fi? How's everyone? Does everyone hear me? Oh, okay. Matt's Wi-Fi. And he was just getting to the best part. So, hi, Matt, you're back.
Okay, I'm back. Oh, I was
Yeah.
gone. All
I
right.
was like, I never know if it's my Wi-Fi or is the guest's Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no, it might be my my in-home Wi-Fi. Maybe all right, I'm back. I'm being told I'm back. All right, I don't know where I was lost. I'm going to answer my second part of the question, and then if anyone wants to know about the part that I cut out on, then I will.
I think it was we're not we don't care if we churn right now. Oh no, did we lose him again? Can everyone hear me well? Okay, thanks, Liz. You're right, the joys of virtual events. We're so sorry for this. He's kind of back.
Am I back?
Yes.
I'm back. All right, I'm going to close all my other programs. Maybe
All right,
that'll
your
help.
last hot take.
All right, my last hot take. I'm gonna give a really quick answer. So I think one, you have to come to peace with not bringing all your customers with you, and it's okay. Because if you try to carry them all with you, then you're going to cause more pain for your team, because then you're going to try to prioritize 8 different types of customers rather than one. So I think that's really important. And then during the scaling up phase, like I think during that, where you find your market, you find the product, you're building upon it. I think generally your customers are gonna be the types of early adopters that are more willing to stick it out with you, and I have found that to be pretty true. And like the pain actually happens when you start to like move within the market, right? Or you're moving to like a new company size type, and you start to like leave other functionality behind. I think it's just really important to be clear with the organization which thing is the priority. And if you don't feel like you have that as the product team, then you need to get that for yourself,
Right.
because then you're going to try to prioritize 8 different things, and it's just not going to work.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so everyone, as we wind down our session, I want to thank Matt for being generous with his time and being a guest on Recess, and you, the viewer, for attending. Matt, where can people find you online? Medium, Twitter, LinkedIn?
Yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Ooh. Okay, guys, Google his name. He'll be there. Okay, so we'll be posting this recording with a summary with the time codes on our Medium, on the Roadmunk Medium. So look forward to that. And our next recess session, we have a great guest lined up as well. And that will be on May 26th. And we look forward to having you join us. Matt, if you're back, if you want to plug where we can find you.
Yeah, I froze again. Yeah, my email is matt@drift.com. Shoot me an email if you want other questions answered or you want to connect or anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again for dropping by. Have a great week. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, everyone.